Brandon asked me to speak on, what was the title again? Developing wholesome relationships among staff in your congregation. Okay, there we go. So, now, that was a difficult one for me, and so I do what I always do when I get stumped. When I come to a spot and I think, man, I don't know what to say about that. I just feel weird. I have a saying of mine that just always go back to, and that is, when in doubt, I ask myself this question: what would Andy Stanley say? Now, those of you who know Andy Stanley know, I just think, there's got to be something in there. And then it clicked in my head. He has said something. He's even written a book about it. So everything I say is a complete ripoff today, but that's okay. I'm not plagiarizing. I'm letting you know it's a complete ripoff from Andy Stanley and his sermon on this here. And this principle he talks about is this. He says often is, your final destination, your destination is, well, I got it wrote down here because I've already blanked on it, Michael. Direction, not intention, determines destination. And I want us to think about that when we think about how to develop some wholesome relationships within our staff and within our congregation and with each other. Of just remembering to ourselves, my direction, not my intention, will take me to my final destination. We're going to look at Proverbs chapter 7 today. We're going to read through a good bit of this here, and hopefully we'll do this in 15 minutes, so we will not be late for lunch. Here's what Solomon says as he walks through this. It starts from verse 6. While I was at the window of my house, I was looking through the curtain, and I saw some naive young man, and one in particular who lacked common sense. I love that right there. He was crossing the street near the house of an immoral woman. He was strolling down her path by her house. It was at twilight. It was in the evening as deep darkness fell. So you got this young guy. He's naive. He's kind of foolish. He's kind of young. He's idealistic. This describes most young ministers. We don't realize that there are dangers out there. We all have great intentions, great motivations. We're wanting to help and save the world. We're doing great things. But we can also find people who are like this woman. Maybe not trying to seduce us, but maybe in some other way. Verse 10, the woman approached him seductively, dressed of sly in heart. She was brash, the rebellious type, never content to stay at home. She is often in the streets and markets, soliciting in every corner. And she threw her arms around him. He kissed him, and with a brazen look said, I've just made my peace offering and fulfilled my vows. You're the one I was looking for. I came out to find you, and here you are. My bed is spread with beautiful blankets, colored with sheets of Egyptian linen. I've perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let us drink. Let us fill our love until the morning. Let us enjoy each other's caress. For my husband is not at home. He's going away on a long trip. He has taken a wallet full of money with him. He won't return until later this month. So she seduced him with her pretty speech and enticed him with her flattery. And then in verse 22, he followed her at once, like an ox going to the slaughter. He was like a deer caught in a trap. Here's what I want you to think about with this here. Here's this young guy. He's at a place he probably shouldn't be. He meets a woman. She's beautiful. She's seductive. She has food in the house. Everything's there. She tells him it's already, all you got to do is come in and we're going to make love together. And he's just right there. Oh man, this is great. He walks right into the trap that's within her. And it says that he was just like, we think that's like a beautiful picture. I mean, this is like a lot of young guys' dreams. I see somebody smiling at me. This is like the Victoria's Secret model invites you in. And you're like, I'm there, man. Let's just go ahead. This is great. And you're ready to sit on Twitter and tell your boys, you'll never believe what just happened to me. I just had take a picture of this right here, you'll never get, this one was coming on to me. And she comes in, she does all this. But he follows her, and Solomon says, he's like an ox going to the slaughter. He's caught like a deer in a trap, awaiting the arrow that should pierce his heart. He is like a bird flying to the snare, little knowing that it was going to cost him his life. And he says, listen to me, son. Pay attention to the words. Don't let your heart stray away towards her. Don't wander down her path. For she has been the ruin of many. Many men have been her victims. Her house is on the road to the grave, and her bedroom is in the den of the dead. When Stanley talks about this, he says, there's a path that's led by her house. And when you're walking down that path, it always will lead toward destruction. When we think about wholesome relationships, here's what I want you to think about is this. No one ever goes into ministry saying, I'm going to have an affair. I've never met the guy yet. But we've all, if you're in ministry long enough, if you've been in church long enough, you've known a minister who's gone down that path. None of us walk in thinking to ourselves, I'm going to walk down this way. It usually starts subtly, slowly. It's usually not as obvious as this. But we all can look at some things and know there are some things, if I do them, that's the path that it's going to lead to. It will always go down there. Most of us have great intentions, and we never see ourselves walking down a path of adultery, fornication, or whatever else it is. But sometimes we begin doing things, and we begin walking down a path slowly and surely because we start flirting with someone, or we start having thoughts about someone. And instead of changing course, we just keep going down the path. And we end up at her house at midnight. It's late at night, and she invites us in. I had a friend of mine who broke my heart a few years ago. He had an affair. He's a minister. And I mean, I just was at the point, I just wanted to cry. I felt so bad. And so I began talking and trying to figure out what was going on. And when I heard the story, here's what I realized quickly was this. If I had told him the direction he was going, if I had said, let me tell you the story, a guy's doing these things, he would have stopped me and said, that is setting yourself up for failure. He would have known it. Because he was a wise man. He knew it. He had seen it happen too. And he had given other guys the same advice of, hey, I see you're going down a path that you really shouldn't go towards. But somewhere on his own end, he was like this young man. He was kind of naive. And when it happened to him, the guy got blinded. And he didn't really pay attention to where he was going. But he was walking down that path. And one of the things we have to do is make sure as ministers we really prepare ourselves and think about what we're doing. I heard guys get up and tell a list of rules that they do. I didn't like their rules, and so I'm not going to tell you my rules because you sit down. But I know everybody has a set of rules. But here's what I do want you to think about is this: you got to be wise, you got to be smart. When we're dealing with people, things happen. Some of my friends have gotten in trouble. They had a secretary, they had a mother, they had a kid who had trauma in their life. We want to come in and be the savior, and we end up putting ourselves in spots we don't need. And you're going to have to be wise, and you're going to have to think about, where am I going? Where is this path leading? Several years ago, I was at church camp, and I was hanging out with some kids doing some stuff, and my wife came up to me, and I was still pretty young, and she's like, I don't like this girl, and I don't want you going over and talking to her anymore. And I'm like, what's up with that? It's like she's 15 years old, and I mean, I was like, she's not the greatest looking girl to begin with, you know? Like, I don't understand this. What's the deal with this here, you know? I mean, it's one thing if she's good looking, but come on, she's 15, she's not, you know, she's kind of homely, yeah? But she's like, no, I don't like this, and I'm just trying to figure out what's going on with this here, you know, what's going on? And I was kind of ticked off because I was thinking, man, this woman's just jealous, and I can't believe, you know, my wife's jealous, and I was kind of a little ticked off about it, and I was thinking, this is just ridiculous. But I heard this voice of wisdom coming in from behind of Stephen Guy, because he's one of the guys I had here, and I just could start hearing Stephen Guy's voice echo in my head, and I thought to myself, you know, I think that my wife's overreacting, I think it's silly, I think it's stupid, but I'm going to do the wise thing, and I'm going to listen to my wife, and if she doesn't like it, why am I going to let some 15-year-old girl come between me and my wife? This is stupid, so I'm not going to go down that path. Well, I'm glad I listened to my wife, because a little bit longer on, I began to see what she was seeing. It took me about a year to figure it out. As a matter of fact, when that girl was on up about 18 years old, we started noticing that she kind of had a sexual attraction towards older men. And we found out later on that she was having affairs with men. And my wife saw something I didn't see. But I was wise enough to listen and to realize she was just saying, I don't even want you to go down a path. And I think what you're doing, you're walking, you're not seeing it. But I'm telling you, she's throwing seductiveness out to you. She caught it. I didn't catch it. I'm glad I listened to her because I didn't have to put myself in the spot. I've been around too many ministers who they walk down a path and listen to problems to the secretary. And they comfort the secretary. They got emotionally involved in the secretary. And when things went bad at home, they would end up at midnight by a woman's door who said, come on in, my husband's gone. And I was like, you know, we're just not even down that path. And so if you got something, we had 4 ministers on staff. I was like, you can go down the hall and talk to any one of those guys. We're not going to talk about it right here. Because I just got to draw a line. Because here's what I know is if I went down certain paths, it's going to come back and bite me. What we've got to remember is, and we got to be wise enough, and we got to listen to people when they tell us things. Because sometimes somebody's going to come and tell you, you don't need to do that. That's not wise. And sometimes you're going to think they're foolish for telling you that. Sometimes you got to take your ego back and listen and say, maybe there's a reason. I need to look around and learn from other people's mistakes and say what got them in trouble. For some guys, I could just see things brewing where guys weren't home, they were out doing ministry all the time, and you could look at their life and say, I just noticed that you're never home. I noticed you're not with your wife a lot. I noticed that you're with these people a lot more often. Something's going to give at some point. I don't know when, but you're walking down a path that's dangerous because you're putting ministry above your family and you're going to a dangerous route. And sure enough, the right situation at the right time presents itself, and we can all fall. One of the things I've learned is this. Companies have learned this. No one's too great to fall. We can all fall. And a lot of us, we're walking down paths. And if we'll listen, we'll realize that we're walking right into destruction. Andy Stanley says, direction, not intentions, determine destination. You can have great intentions. You can never intend to do something. But a little flirting here, a little bit of this here, you can be walking down a path. And you won't even realize, you'll be like the wise, this naive young man in Proverbs. You're walking down the street, you find yourself somewhere you didn't know, and in a moment's notice you can be seduced by anyone. And you'll be like an ox to the slaughter, a deer going to a snare, a bird flying into a trap. And what you realize is you've sacrificed your faith, your family, and your future. And you didn't even realize it was happening. Most guys never walk into ministry saying, I'm getting in ministry so I can have an affair with somebody. But a lot of guys have gotten there because they started down a path they could have avoided if they just paid attention and listened. Make sure you listen to other guys. And if somebody whispers in your ear, I don't know about that right there. Don't be prideful or arrogant. You may think it's crazy. You may not have wrong intentions, but you may be walking down a direction that's leading somewhere you shouldn't go. And so be careful with that.